We're live. It's 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time here in beautiful sunny Utah. We are currently broadcasting from St. George, and this is Godless Sermon 36, I believe, and the penultimate Godless Sermon of 2025. This year's been kind of crap. Don't 2025, 1 star, not recommended. Um, could go back and do it again. Would keep the Church of Korihor, throw away everything else. Yeah, that's my assessment. And you can tell the boss I said so, whoever that is. But one thing seems to me relatively certain: it's not God, um, which kind of sucks because now I got nobody to bitch to but you guys. But luckily for me, there's Star Trek. And I am fortunate to have had people. Hey, thank you, Lisa. Fortunate to have had people in my life who helped me through many struggles, many trials this year, and I feel very fortunate to have had a good upbringing with the wisest of Scripture that could be provided in the circumstance of Gene Roddenberry. It is the return of the Star Trek Godless Sermons, where I profane the good name of Gene Roddenberry and we promote space communism. I mean, what could be better? We're going to have some fun and we're going to talk about Lieutenant Commander Data. Those of you who remember, I believe my last Star Trek sermon was the sermon. Let's see, which one was it? That was it was way back in the spring. It was the Sage, Wisdom of the Sage. Anyway, but that one I talked about how growing up my prophet was Captain Jean-Luc Picard and the wonderful things I learned from him. But if Jean-Luc Picard is my captain, definitely the person who is me in Star Trek The Next Generation is not technically a person at all, and that is Lieutenant Commander Data. And I wanted to get a chance to. I've talked about Commander Data before, but I don't think I've. But I wanted to go a little deeper into what made Data, in my opinion, actually human. You know that Data, if you look at the title of this, Data used to always introduce himself to people because people didn't understand the look of him. He would have to explain to people, I am an android. There's even like compositions, composites people have done on online of just Data saying over and over to different people, I am an android. I am an android. I am an android. I am an android. And it's so funny to me looking back on it, how impactful Data was to me, considering that growing up as an autistic person, I kind of felt like I was always having to do the same with other people because I would miss social cues, or because my hair was never combed, or because I didn't react in a human like way in a human situation. And so people would get upset, and I would constantly have to explain to people, I'm an android. But we didn't know that that's what autism was at the time. And so as I look back in life, I realize that a lot of my concepts of what consciousness is were shaped by Star Trek The Next Generation, and particularly by Lieutenant Commander Data. And I was thinking about it last night and this morning, particularly as I was putting together my thoughts, because I was planning to go a different direction with this Godless sermon, but that was about the business side of the Church of Korihor, and I just feel like it's not the right time. And something very thank you, Vin. That's very good. Um, that's very useful. Very useful. Uh, I'm so glad that we go to the internet as our chapel. Anyways, we're going to start with an opening hymn. But I was thinking about how we really have a very we have a very important mission in our life to understand death. And data is really good at it. And it's a joyful thing if you look at it the right way. And I just wanted to share that with you because I was thinking this morning about how it still puzzles me that anybody thinks about heaven and dreams of heaven. And how, for me, heaven has always been simply a fear of mortality, anxiety regarding mortality. And it makes sense that our brains evolved to survive. But that means that they didn't evolve to contemplate our own mortality. Other people's mortality, I think so. I think that was necessary. And culturally, certainly, we have evolved. But I think that we have not really, that our brains just had no function to contemplate our own mortality. We each individually have to evolve that way over the course of our lives, and that's why it's so painful. And so, of course, rather than growing new neural pathways simply to contemplate the finiteness of our survival and why that's meaningful, we tend to skip it and cheat. And that's why one of many reasons why human beings invented God. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And it's actually going to be very interesting. It's going to be fun. There may be tears. That is very normal with a Godless sermon. Don't be startled if I cry or if you do. And don't be, and remember, it's only fiction, just like sermons about God. So, just want to remind everybody, we're the Church of Korihor, a secular congregation, and we are here to get, among other things, more money than God. Hey! Hey! You Robin Hoods gather round, storm these pews at the sound, spoil God's coffers for Korihor, steal these ties to feed the poor. Poor church mice and their offering plates will wake to our hoods in their face. Rob St. Peter down to the floor, make God stand for something more. We'll fleece Mammon's coffers, their starving flock to feed, send them back to Jesus without their means. So Judas steeples into unholy sod, finally have more money than God. If Uncle Sam had their money, he'd feed the folks they don't. But godly men get elected so that he won't. They dance round the mountain with their golden calf, cast their tablets down on Yahweh's behalf. No need to pay to pray in their pews. Look to Korihor's good news. We'll fleece Mammon's coffers, their starving flock to feed, send them back to Jesus without their means. So Judas steeples into unholy sod, finally have more money than God. Their golden gates won't let us in, or the widows might redeem their sins. Graven images paint a hell so bold, but golden plates can't indulge their souls. With their 30 pieces of silver, we'll escape their hell. If they try to stop us, we'll ring their bell. If they get up the Danites on their graves, we'll trod, finally have more money
Then go.
Yeah, well, you would, Jules, ladies and gentlemen, our lovely luminary, Jules Treasures, also known as Jules Del Sol, who has given us a couple of godless sermons in the past. Hopefully, in 2026, give us a lot more and give me a break. But yeah, thank you all for being here. I wanted to go on to talk about our sermon here in a minute, but we have a little bit of church business. I don't know if any of you saw this. Oh, I was saying, Jules. Of course, you love the Robin Hood reference, Jules. You guys don't know Jules is an archer, and has given us our first godless sermon with us was the meaning of arrow in our lives, and I thought it was very, very good. I'd highly recommend people go back and watch it. You guys will notice we're now doing the Venmo link, and that is because, frankly, the Church of Corohor is going to start supporting all of our clergy a lot more. And we have a link where people, if they donate directly to our clergy, can ask for a tax receipt, and we will gladly give you a tax receipt. But donations given through Venmo are greatly appreciated. They help me out a lot. Also, you can go to the Church of Corohor's website and give directly to the church. The church has lots of financial needs, and frankly, if you give money to me, I'm likely to donate it to the church because, frankly, we got a lot of expenses. Interestingly enough, yesterday came to discover that our renewal with the state of Utah, yes, the Church of Corohor, is a church according to the state of Utah, and we have to renew that every year. It's free to register with the IRS as a church, but the IRS isn't likely to recognize it unless you are registered through a state. So we pay the state, and came to discover yesterday that it costs only $18 to renew our registration with the state. But then came to discover we didn't have $18 in the coffers. So I was happy to donate $18 to keep the Church of Corohor thriving for one more year. I did have a little church business that I wanted to share with you guys that I thought you would find amusing. I'm going to remove this. I wasn't going to do this. You know, I love to do impromptu things. I just published this last night. I did not expect for this to happen. I'm calling this ambiguous endorsement. Where is this? In Corohor. Where's my Corohor folder? Here we go. I thought you guys would get a kick out of this. Ambiguous endorsement for the Corohors. Check this out.
We're gonna give it this one more super chat just because it's a friend of mine, one of my favorite atheists. Go ahead. I was on his show actually.
Hellfire Agency. I agree with Hayden that atheists get it right. Reasons, greetings from your favorite Corohor.
Hellfire Agency has the Church of Corohor. He actually is a fun guy to talk to. I've had good conversations with him. So
I've got one last question for you.
Okay.
One of the things that
I thought that was amusing. That happened literally just last night in Jacob Hansen's live. Those of you who don't know, there's a big joke. There's a joke going on that I once said on Culture's program that I don't know why I call him Jacob Handsome. I don't really think of him as terribly handsome, but he was actually a very nice guy to me. Apparently, he was a bit of a dick to my dear friend Jenny when she went on his show. So I don't appreciate that. But you know what? I'll take whatever good endorsements we get for the Church of Corohor. And yes, there is an episode. The first Church for Atheists episode is me interviewing Jacob Hansen, and he went over our website, and he actually was fairly impressed. This Mormon apologist is actually kind of impressed with the Church of Corohor, and I don't blame him because we're freaking rad. So that just happened. We got the witty, sharp commentary with Lisa, and I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about data. Okay, now this is going to get a little heavy. Trigger warning. We're going to talk about existential crisis. We're going to talk about my existential crisis, but we're going to start by talking about data. That's easier because data is fictional. That's one of the reasons why we love legends here at the Church of Korihor. After all, the Church of Korihor is based, the name comes from a fictional character that came out of the mind, I believe, of Joseph Smith, which my friend Stephen Pinecker from Mormon Book Reviews loves to remind me. Even your atheist church is dedicated to the name of a man who was invented by Joseph Smith. So even you acknowledge the genius of Joseph Smith. He likes to stick that one right between the ribs there, that Stephen Pinecker. I wish no harm to come to him, but well, it's rude. It's rude. Let's learn a little bit. I want to show you a little clip. So you're going to see a clip here. I want you to notice Data, more importantly, the actor Brent Spiner's mannerisms and some of the acting choices he does. I'm an acting guy, studied theater and film and television, worked in video production for 25 years. And I appreciate little pieces of business in the acting world. You call anything that you do with your hands, with your body, anything you do while reciting your lines, rather than just sitting there reciting your lines, is business. You do a little piece of business. In vaudeville, for example, they hit a lot of times. They would have things like you would have somebody take off their glasses and clean off the lens in their glasses, but of course there is no lens. There's no lenses in the glass. And no glass in the glasses, and so they would scrub the glasses, and then stick the handkerchief through the eyeglasses and pull them through, and then put them on. That's a little piece of business. Brent Spiner and all of the cast members on Star Trek: The Next Generation did amazing little pieces of business. And in this scene, they're going to talk about the death of Lieutenant Kwan. And in one episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, inexplicably, it's kind of a detective episode, and it's also kind of an opportunity to explore emotional intelligence around mortality, because Lieutenant Kwan is a member of the crew who climbs up to the warp nacelles, one of the warp nacelles. Those are the two flat pieces on the back of the Enterprise that allow the ship to jump to warp, to bend space and time and jump to warp speed, and opens it up and jumps in, terminating himself. And there's going to be some keywords in here that are not entirely social media friendly. We're just going to go with it and hope that nobody's going to get into trouble. But we have to be able to talk about these things. So YouTube, Google, Twitch. We now, by the way, those of you who don't know, we are now streaming on Twitch, apparently. I mean, I've connected it. I don't know if it's working. Apparently it's working. I tried to connect to X, and that's not working. I don't know what the story is. I tried to connect to Facebook, and it's like, you're not a big enough platform. I said, says you. Everybody follow the Church of Korihor on freaking Facebook. What are you doing? Are you just going to pass around ivermectin recipes? I mean, come on. What else are you going to do on Facebook? But we're going to watch the scene where Geordi LaForge, brilliant actor, full of rage. I see you, Geordi. In this scene, talks with Lieutenant Commander Data. And Lieutenant Commander Data approaches him about how people are grieving over Lieutenant Kwan. And I want to just make some notes about it. So here we are. This is courtesy of Paramount Pictures and parents, companies, subsidiaries, and licensors, etc. This is under fair use. So, have your lawyer call our lawyer. We don't have them. Why do I have no volume? Do you guys hear that? Is it giving you no volume? Someone give me in the comments if you hear the audio. Do you hear no audio? Oh, this is going to suck. No sound. You guys can hear me, yeah? Yeah, I'm going to load another one. This was working a minute ago. This was working a minute ago.
Really?
Sound on this one? You guys heard sound there, right? Let me try removing. Oh, hold on. Let me try seeing if the file actually doesn't have sound, because that's going to suck. This file has no freaking sound. I'm going to fix that. Skipping ahead, we're going to talk about Captain Picard. We're going to start with this. Captain Picard. No. Let's do this. Let's do this one. Okay. This is a conversation. We're going to start with a conversation by a conversation that Data has with Commander Riker. And I'm going to fix this issue with the I'm going to fix the sound issue. Okay. And Commander Riker, he approaches Riker about the death of a crewman, and they happen to mention something very important about the death of a previous crewman, the first death of a crewman that we note in Star Trek The Next Generation. Let's see if you notice it. And adding to the stage now.
How well did you know Lieutenant Astor?
We spent some time together. Not very well. How well did you know her?
Why do you ask?
Well, you just asked me.
But why do you ask the question? Since her death, I have been asked several times to define how well I knew Lieutenant Astor.
Notice the guilt on Jonathan Frakes' face. I think this is really profound. I think because you have to understand, on the Enterprise, Commander Riker's primary role, besides being vice president to Captain Picard, being the guy who steps in and takes command in the event that Captain Picard is incapacitated or dies, is that his role is to assess the crew and on a regular basis and maintain the personnel files and the personnel of needs of the crew. So he manages all the shifts. He's the one who does all the performance evaluations together with Commander Troy, Deanna Troy anyway, who he has history with. Running gag on Star Trek is that he is kind of like the Captain Kirk in Star Trek The Next Generation, in that he's who's sleeping with all the women on the Enterprise. And so this is all part of Gene Roddenberry's polyamorous vision of a sexually liberated communist space utopia. And Riker represents that Captain Kirk side. It's like, in the future, marriage is going to be so blasé and outdated. Nobody will do it. Everybody's just going to be screwing. Anyways, but you'll notice the guilt on his face as they talk about Lieutenant Astor, and about on the one side, who knows what his experience with this officer was exactly, but he immediately regrets that he didn't know her better, and that it's not only his job, but that to treat her like treat all the crew members as to treat all the crew members as people, and not just ranking them in his scorecard. But you can tell the look of guilt on his face, and I think that's amazing. And I love Data's question about this. And he's like, people keep asking me how well I knew her. Data has to always remind people, I'm an android. I don't feel love. I don't feel feelings. We're gonna evaluate that deeper, because I put to you that Commander Data did feel. He did have feelings, and particularly he felt love. So we'll keep going here, and then I'll try to pause before we get to talking about Lol.
And I heard you ask Wesley on the bridge how well he knew Jeremy. Does the question of familiarity have some bearing on death?
Do you remember how we all felt when Tasha died?
I do not sense the same feelings of absence that I associate with Lieutenant Yar, although I cannot say precisely why.
Okay. So key to what I'm bringing up here. Okay. Because this is going to be, we're going to get into lull here in a minute. And I've talked about this before, but I felt like I could do it better. Did you notice that, that Data feels differently about the passing of Tasha Yar? Tasha Yar, if you don't know, played by Denise Crosby, was killed off in the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation because the producers at that time, so goes the story, were upset that she started raising in every episode, in pretty much every season of Star Trek. There's at least one hottie, right? You have 7 of 9 in Voyager. You have Gene Roddenberry's future wife in the original Star Trek, played Nurse Chapel. I forget her first name, and but Mrs. Roddenberry eventually, whom he was sleeping with at the time when he he was cheating on his wife, on his wife at the time with. For a man who loved and had a lot of money, he doesn't appear to have really appreciated marriage very well, and he definitely didn't appreciate money. He didn't like money. But anyways, Gene Roddenberry was always operating on a different level, and the writers were always. If you go back, you watch the William Shatner produced a documentary about the production of TNG called Chaos on the Bridge. And they talk about how the writers would complain frequently that Gene Roddenberry was trying to build into the logic of every episode of Star Trek that there was no human conflict in the future. That when people embraced Marxism, frankly, at its core, the fundamental concepts of communism at its core, it would be the end of human conflict. And the writers hated it because it was like, great. No, you didn't task us with an impossible task by telling us that we have to write episodes that have no conflict. So then they started to convince him, at least let us talk about mortality. Communism doesn't put an end to, food replicators will change everything in the future. And it can even put an end to capitalism, put an end to money, put an end to governments, put an end to the state. But that's not going to make people live forever, and that's important. And frankly, it's lovely to talk about the utopia, but we also have to make television, Gene.
Just human nature, Data.
Human nature, sir.
We feel a loss more intensely when it's a friend.
But should not the feelings run just as deep, regardless of who has died?
Maybe they should, Data. Maybe if we felt any loss as keenly as we felt the death of one close to us, human history would be a lot less bloody.
LaForge to Riker.
Okay, so I found the clip that I apparently got without sound. I'm going to try and load that in here and see if that works. It might not. StreamYard, please be good. But okay, so we're going to pause from that. Put a finger in that. Notice the difference with Tasha Yar. Those of you who know Star Trek: The Next Generation will know that in the first season, when Tasha, I didn't finish explaining. I'm all over the place. This whole thing about the no sound clip has really thrown me off. I don't know if you guys have noticed. Denise Crosby was the hottie in Star Trek: The Next Generation. She was, I believe, a fitness model. But she was, and swimsuit model. She was basically skinny girl who was always bikini ready, shall we say. And I'm not saying she was cast for that reason, but every series of Star Trek needed a hottie. And so she was the hottie in the first season and in Star Trek: The Next Generation. And she went to the crew members, the other cast members, to raise awareness and said, I asked around and found out how much everybody was getting paid. And I don't know if you know this, but the male cast members on Star Trek, on our new Star Trek show, are all, even the minor roles, are all being paid than the female actors. And she's like, it's not right. It's not right. And she stuck up for the women in the cast to say, we all got to go in there and demand that they pay us the same as the men. And the crew, this is the way I understand anyways, and the production team were very upset, for a very labor first environment in Hollywood. Studios, I'm just saying this now, studios are stupidly right wing. They are very, very anti-union, very anti. I've talked about in the past that when Screen Actors Guild first went on strike, the president of the Screen Actors Guild came to the studios and said, this is not right. You guys have got to do something about our people. And he was an actor, and as well as the head of the Screen Actors Guild. And he said, you got to do right by our people. We have demands, and you can't just ignore them anymore. And the studios were like, what are you going to do? Get John Wayne and Marilyn Monroe to take to the street saying, hell no, we won't go, shouting with pickets? And he's like, it may be just like that, yes. And if you think that the news won't cover it, you're crazy. Even you with your influence over the news are not going to be able to shut us up if we decide to go on strike. And they called him out on it. They were like, yeah, do it. Show us, flex your Hollywood muscle. And sure enough, they went on strike. And yes, you had actors, people who were famously right wing on a lot of stuff, like John Wayne, took to the streets, picked up pickets, and said, we won't work until our demands are met. And they stood up for the union, and the union stood up for them, and they got better working conditions. They got better pay, better compensation. And frankly, today it is very plausible, I would say, that you could say that among all the remaining AFL-CIO unions, the Screen Actors Guild is the most powerful in the world. And so, it can work in any event. But Denise Crosby apparently pissed off the wrong people, and then showed up on set one day to be handed new pages for an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, where I believe it was the last episode of the first season, before they had syndication, before they were guaranteed that they had a season 2, that her character dies and dies an ignominious death. She's just, a meaningless death. And for the rest of, and so you have this labor dispute basically that shaped for the rest of the storyline of Star Trek: The Next Generation this interesting thing about death, because everybody had to keep coming back to addressing why Denise Crosby was fired, by addressing why Tasha Yar had to die. And Whoopi Goldberg had a great episode where she contemplates this, because they brought Denise Crosby back on. They had her, cast as herself in another episode. One of my favorite episodes ever is Yesterday's Enterprise. And then later she came back as her daughter, in her Romulan daughter, in any event. So Denise Crosby did end up coming back, and she has talked, since then about how, yes, that dispute really did happen. Yes, I was pissed off. Yes, I hated that they fired me from the show, but I was grateful that they had a change of, production team leadership, and they made it up to me. And I appreciate that. That's the way I understand it from having listened to her speak on several times. But you can tell when she talks about it, she's still salty. Yeah. And understandably so. So anyways, but the point is, in the first season, there's the Space Madness episode, where everybody starts getting hot and heavy. They catch this virus that makes everybody that gets everybody horny, and everybody's after each other. Beverly Crusher and Captain Picard can't, or just barely, they're like unzipping their uniforms and like wiping the sweat off of themselves, and everybody's just like, Riker's like nowhere to be seen. Everybody's just, getting frisky. And Tasha, dressed in a very sexy outfit, answers the door when Data comes to her quarters and she asks him if he is functional in every way, and he says, of course, in every way, and she hooks up with Data, and all throughout the rest of the episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, whenever it comes to Data's love, relationships, romantic relationships, it's always touching on this idea that Data can't feel love. Data doesn't know how to feel love, doesn't understand love as a human emotion, and doesn't feel romance. He can apparently have sex, but he can't really desire it. He can't feel desire. And so, but at the same time, he frequently talks about desires. I want to be. And the one thing that the desire that keeps emerging, even as other immortal beings, presumably, confront him about it. What is your deal with mortality? What is your deal with emotions? If these humans could abandon emotions, they would all do it. And he's not convinced. And he says, I want to be human. I desire to be human. Even has an episode with Q where Q is temporarily made mortal and powerless, and take away all of his powers. We're going to meet Q and talk about Q here in a minute too, when we talk about Captain Picard. But Q confronts him. He's like, "It's pathetic. Do you not realize that you are perfection compared to humans?" And here I am trapped in this mortal body. And Data looks at him and says, "I find it remarkable that the one thing that you have been given just temporarily, the ability to be powerless and to be mortal as a human being, is the only, and you would just throw away and discard so easily, is the only thing I want in life." So Data has desires, and his desires largely revolve around feeling intimacy and intimately connecting with death. So with that, I'm going to show you, if I'm able to, we're going to try one more time. I'm going to try windowing in this this tab, and we'll see if it works. We've had failure with this before. It's just really quick conversation between Geordi and Data about the death of Lieutenant Kwan.
Bait if we need it.
Acknowledged.
Geordi, would you agree that the instinct for self-preservation is shared by most life forms?
I'd say it's probably the most basic instinct, Data.
That being the case, I find it difficult to understand why someone would deliberately terminate their own existence.
I don't know, Data. All I can think is that maybe Lieutenant Kwan felt that there was something wrong with his life, something that he felt powerless to fix.
I believe I understand. I have been in a similar situation.
Really?
The first months following my activation were a difficult period for me.
I want to take a quick moment. Everybody here? Can everybody hear that? All right. I'm sorry to have to do this from the YouTube link. That's not how I wanted it, YouTube. I'm just, I'm relegated to a desperate situation here. Okay. Notice this. Remember I said, look for Brent Spiner's use of pieces of business in the action here. One of those is that when Geordi folds his arms, he folds his arms. He wants Geordi. He's noticed that humans use gestures like folding your arms, body language like this, that says, I'm closed off, I'm protected, I'm protecting my heart, right? I'm protecting myself, I'm protecting my core. And when he sees Geordi take this defensive gesture, this defensive body language, he mirrors it to put him at ease, to try and understand. And this is the moment where I went, holy crap. I rewatch every episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation every year. I binge Star Trek: The Next Generation every single year. This show is so instrumental to my whole philosophy, my whole life. And when I first noticed this a couple of years ago and put it on TikTok, I'm like, I have to capture this. That was the first thing I noticed was, look at how Commander Data has learned to mirror people's body language so that they feel more comfortable. He says he doesn't have feelings, but he tries to emote with them. We saw the same thing with Commander Riker. When he asks Riker, why did, how well did you know Lieutenant Astor? And he says, and he says, not very well. And then Data stops and listens and pauses. And he's like, well, how well did you know her? Is because Data has learned that first people give one response. Then if you stop and listen, they give the real response. And this is why I think this is so profound to me, is that it's like an autistic person. He is like an autistic person, because when you have autism, when you're on the spectrum, you're frequently trying to learn the mannerisms that human beings and social cues that human beings use so that they will accept you.
There were many problems associated with my becoming sentient.
Because your neural net was still forming.
As I acquired new skills, neural pathways would form, replacing other, less complex pathways.
Okay, that calls back an episode, Measure of a Man, in which Captain Picard has to defend Data as a sentient life form. And this is, again, running theme in Star Trek The Next Generation is Data conscious the way we are conscious? He is a computer that can calculate trillions of calculations a second, much faster than any human being can. But his positronic net, his AI brain, effectively functions and processes information very much in the same way that the computer in the meaty, fatty, salty biological computers in our brains, in our heads, calculate. So is his consciousness really that different from ours? And if not, then why is it that he can't feel things and we can? Are feelings a flaw in our programming or a feature? Is it a feature? Or is it a bug? So this keeps coming up. They decided in Measure of a Man that because Data can determine his own future and make choices, express desires that nobody has programmed into him, that nobody's gone in and said, this is your programming, this is your instinct, this is your thing. He is making choices, effectively what you might call free will. Even in a deterministic world where there is no free will, it's the closest thing to what we think of as free will. That's the reason why we as human beings, I think, deceive ourselves into believing that we have free will. But in that way, you would have to say that Data is sentient. And so so when he talks about his sentience, we're going back to that episode where we're referencing the fact that the Federation has been relegated to decide that Data is in fact a life form. He is alive.
It was very disorienting.
Not bad.
As my systems grew in complexity, it became increasingly difficult to integrate new pathways into my existing neural net. The probability of cascade failure grew with each additional pathway. I came to the conclusion it would be safer and easier to shut myself down and start again.
Notice that what he's saying here is learning. He's talking about learning and developing just in the same way that we as human beings learn and develop in childhood, and talks about how the complexity of it, even for a being that has this near perfect AI processing chip in his whole body, but particularly in his head, where his brain would be, is dealing with such complex things by growing up in a short period of time, not as slowly as we develop, but suddenly growing up all of a sudden, the complexity of just the process of learning and developing so many sub-processes or understandings of the nature of existence, of being alive, becomes so overwhelming to even his near perfect brain that it causes him an existential crisis. And that, I thought that was really fascinating. I thought the writing in this episode is among the best.
Yeah, but if you had done that, you wouldn't have remembered any of the things that had happened to you.
In a way, it would have been like committing suicide.
Again, social media networks, please don't take it down. This is important conversations we need to have. I know that this is a buzzword, but this is important. He is using Lieutenant Kwan's suicide to contemplate his own lack of mortality. Thanks, Nikki. Everybody, we got my dear chosen family and blood family sister Nikki is here with us, also luminary with the Church of Korihor. And so this is a beautiful way for them to talk about and grieve Lieutenant Kwan, even Data, who apparently has no feelings, so he's not able to grieve anybody, right? And yet here he is trying to understand why Lieutenant Kwan took his own life.
So what did you do?
I decided against the procedure. I chose instead to treat the problems I was having with my systems as challenges to overcome, rather than obstacles to be avoided.
It's a great way to look at it, Data.
True, but is it? It's one of these situations. Like when I heard Geordi the first time, I remember the first time I saw this episode and thought to myself, is Geordi right? Is it a good way to look at things? To say, the reason why you don't take your own life is because you choose to have a positive attitude. As a person who has to do this regularly, I have frequently to ask myself, because this is one of the best arguments, I think, for choosing to be alive. If you have the ability to choose to be alive, why would you do it? Life is so full of pain. Life is so full of suffering. And even when we contemplate heaven, there's this idea of sad heaven, right? Even if you go to heaven, believe that you must go to heaven instead of hell, because you don't want to be like those poor bastards in hell. How are you going to be happy in heaven, knowing that people you are supposed to love, even Jesus teaches his followers to have love one to another and to have love of other people. So if you're supposed to love these people and hope they go to heaven with you and not to hell, how are you going to enjoy heaven for eternity, knowing those beings exist eternally in hell? That's why there's emerged out of this. It's a huge problem with Christianity. Of all the problems with Christianity, I think this is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, is that the concept of heaven, which concentrated only on yourself, I want to go to heaven and not to hell, is really selfish and frankly just a yearning based out of only the fear of death. And especially when it comes to talking about suicide. And because you look through the Old Testament and the New Testament, there is absolutely no reference that I have found. Somebody correct me. I would love to be corrected. There is no prohibition against suicide in the Bible. And yet, almost every Jew, almost every Christian, almost every person who reads these books, these documents, for inspiration as the Word of God, believes that it is wrong to take your own life. But that is, so tell me that their beliefs are all built out of the Word of God, out of Scripture. It's just not true. People write their own Bible. You don't have to open the Bible to believe in the Bible, because people put in that book whatever they want. That's how Scripture is used. Apart from the Church of Korihor's canon, which I am still working on the versification. We will publish it soon. I've been working on it like actively. Anyways, so that's the end of that. That's the end of that episode. So I'm going to take that off of the stage. I'm going to get better at this. I have gotten a lot better at this. Okay, I want to go back to talking about. Actually, I want to skip over to this section. We'll see if it has sound. Yeah, we discern it has sound. Yeah. Captain Picard. After this, there's a scene where they inform Captain Picard of Lieutenant Kwan's death. And Captain Picard, is dismayed, and they're not used to seeing him that way, right? Captain Picard, he is the indefatigable. He is the Horatio Hornblower. He is impervious to crisis because he is the consummate leader. But then all of a sudden, a member of his crew jumps into one of the warp nacelles, and he is basically broken. And he insists on a thorough investigation by Commander Riker and crew into if you have to go into Lieutenant Kwan's private logs, find something that I can tell his parents, because he seemed happy, he was dating, he was in love, he had all these things going for him. His career in Starfleet was, accelerating. He was a bright young person with a bright future ahead of him. What happened? And he says, I have to report to this boy's parents. And I've never in my career in Starfleet had to inform a parent that their child took their own life. And he's like, I need something. I have to have an answer. And you can tell he needs an answer. He wants to know how a person under his command could choose this thing, could choose to make their own end this way. And and it reminded me of this episode with Captain Picard called Tapestry. So I want to share that with you.
Hang on. I told you, you're dead. This is the afterlife. And I'm God. You are not God.
John Lancey. Beautiful. This is where you'll understand why in the series called Picard, Q became the main part of this. John Lancey and Patrick Stewart, their interplay is beautiful. These characters are them.
Blasphemy. You're lucky I don't cast you out or smite you or something. The bottom line is, your life ended about 5 minutes ago under the inept ministrations of Dr. Beverly Crusher.
Knows the little jab there? He knows that Picard is in love with Beverly Crusher.
No. I am not dead. Because I refuse to believe that the afterlife is run by you. The universe is not so badly designed.
It is. It is badly designed. His little quip here is that it's not that badly designed.
Very well. If you really require more evidence of your post-mortem status, I guess I'll just have to provide you some.
Jean-Luc, I told you not to go running off to that academy.
Father.
I told you that Starfleet would bring you to a bad end. But you wouldn't listen. Now look at you. Dead before your time.
Q, enough of this. Enough what?
Why couldn't you have listened? Didn't you know that I was working for your best interests?
Q, stop this.
After all these years, even now, you manage to disappoint me, Jean-Luc.
He's not the only one who would like to have a word with you.
Why, Jean-Luc? Why did you do it? Captain, there are still people down there. We can't abandon.
There must be some other way, Captain. Some other choice than firing on them. Warning you. If you continue on this course... Direct hit, sir. The ship is destroyed. Lieutenant Picard to the bridge.
These are the voices of all the people you've killed throughout the years. Whom I've killed? What do you mean? Death has made you a little dim, Jean-Luc. These are the voices of all the people who have died through your actions or your inactions. Now, if you have any words of apology or regret, I believe they're all listening. They're a surly bunch, actually, so I wouldn't drag this out too long.
So, I'm going to cut that short. I'm going to move on and talk about some other things. But the thing is curious here. Let me see if I can skip ahead in here. You see this. So, this episode is about the moment when Jean-Luc Picard first dies in the storyline. He has an artificial heart because while he was this young, ambitious officer fresh out of the academy, on the night before he and his friends were shipping out to be deployed in their posts, he doesn't call a certain girl back. He ends up sleeping with one of his friends from the academy, and never calls her back. Never, he's just because he's just apparently even the wise Jean-Luc Picard had a fuckboy face. And so then also the next day, his friends decide that they're going to cheat a bunch of Nausicaans at a game, and he gets stabbed through the heart, and he should have died by all rights, except technology saved him. And so the rest of his life is kind of an encore. His whole life is this encore of, you should have died. What are you afraid of? And that's actually, and it turns out he learns that that's basically what made him captain in the end, was that he starts to take risks because he didn't want, because he should have died already. The fear of death no longer has the same hold on him because he wants his life to be meaningful. And that's how he ends up making decisions based purely upon justice, purely upon wanting to do what's right. And so that's how he becomes the Jean-Luc Picard that we know. I want to go back real quickly to this series where we want to talk about Lol. Lol, if you don't know, is so the girl you see in this shot in the center here is an android made by Data. She lives only a few hours, and then she doesn't pull through. And this is the point where Counselor Troy explains to them that she was talking to Lol, who's built off of Data's own positronic network. She has his abilities slightly improved, and he has developed her to become his offspring, and even gone to Captain Picard, who tells him, you didn't consult with me before you did this, and I really wish you hadn't done it. And he asks him, are you going? And he basically asks him, do you want me to kill this creation I've made? And because I don't think I can do it. And Captain Picard says, no, I'm not telling you. I'm just saying I wish you had talked to me about this, because I defended you in court saying that you were a living sentient being, even though you are an android. And now you've gone off and made an android, and we haven't planned how we're going to figure this out. And I didn't order you to do it. And the fact that you went off on your own and did this, you created a life form. You created new life without consulting with me, without consulting with Starfleet. And Data insists to him, he says, you wouldn't ask this of any other crew member who got pregnant, basically. And that's not the same. That's child rearing. This is creating new life. And he says, and he asks him, what's the difference? Captain Picard, you got to imagine Captain Picard's got to be making all sorts of justifications in his brain. Did I defend this guy only to make him drive my philosophical standards all the way to the edge? So Data has a daughter, and she chooses the name Lol. And this is at the end of her life. She has, in her brief period of being alive, she has learned how to flirt. She has learned what it means to be a woman. She chose to be a human female, which is curious. If she is part of Data's brain, if she came out of Data's brain, and remember that Data, whenever he talks about grief, it winds up being a conversation. Usually when he talks about grief, especially in that conversation we had with Commander Riker, he thinks about Tasha Yar, or at least Commander Riker brings it up, and he says that he experiences the absence of Tasha Yar in a way that he doesn't experience the absence of other characters, of other crewmen. So that tells us that even though Tasha, after she hooks up with Data during the space madness, the space horniness, after they're done, she approaches him, and very comically at the end of that episode says, Data, and he turns and looks at him and she says, it never happened. And then she storms off, and he looks very confused. But there's a connection that was made there. They developed a bond, an intimacy. whether it's while they were hooking up or otherwise we don't really see. But he notices her absence, and then he creates a child that can choose its own species appearance to look like any species, can choose its own gender, can choose its own name, and the child born out of his brain chooses to be female. I put to you, Data feels, but his feelings, the part of his brain that learned to develop intimacy and fear of mortality and a desire to understand mortality, is born out of the absence in his life of Tasha Yar. And I think, now this is very out there, I think that absence of Tasha in him that he feels, and the love, the grief of Tasha made Lol and made her a woman. And so this is the moment where I'm going to skip ahead here. So Commander Troy is there, or Counselor Troy is there to tell him, she noticed after all the feelings, because Lol develops feelings, and mainly her feelings are about the impermanence of the human beings and the crewmates that she is developing relationships with rather quickly, even kisses Commander Riker because she notices that humans press their faces on each other. And Whoopi Goldberg's character, Guinan, tells her that's the way humans express emotion, because she seems really concerned. She says that human is eating that other human, and she's like, no, humans do that to try to show each other that they desire each other. And she's like, oh, and then Commander Riker just happens to approach the bar where Lol, who is definitely not 21, is serving drinks in 10 forward in the lounge. And he walks up and he notices her, but doesn't notices Lol, who looks like an adult female, a human, but he doesn't recognize her. And of course, as the first officer on the Enterprise, he's supposed to know everybody who's on board. And he happens to walk up to her and smile at her and says something to the effect of, well, looky who we have here. And she grabs him over the bar, pulls him over the bar, and lays a big kiss on him, and then just as Data's walking in, and then Data asks him, Commander, I must ask you, what are your intentions with my daughter? Commander Riker, this is the first he knows about it. Anyway, as she develops more feelings about the impermanence of relationships with other beings, because they will all die, and because and her differences to them, and the fact that they cannot see her the same way, they cannot feel the same way about her because she is immortal like Data, presumably, and but that it may come to a point where she will have to say goodbye, whether it's to say goodbye to Data because he is destroyed in some way, whether it is to say goodbye to her mortal counterparts because they die. The anxiety over a future where she may end up alone is so overwhelming in its emotions that it causes cascade failures. Remember what we were talking when we were talking with Geordi in the other clip about Lieutenant Kwan's suicide. He mentions that when he was becoming sentient, he started to experience cascade failures, and that was where he decided he has to either choose to survive and make the choice to live, treating these cascade failures as a challenge rather than surrender, and overcome them. He survives the crisis in that way. But Lol, who is able to process emotions, feel real emotions as far as anybody can tell. Even Counselor Troy notices she feels real feelings, and they are all and she feels anxiety. She basically has an anxiety attack, and it effectively kills her. So I'm going to skip ahead here. After the process, the admiral here, this is an admiral who has shown up to confront Data and Picard about Lol, because he says they don't, you didn't have authorization to do this. Maybe you can get Commander Data defined as sentient, but if you're creating artificial life, that artificial life is property of Starfleet. So he's there to represent the state. But in the process, he gets to know how all the members of the crew have developed relationships with Lal during her short life, and they're friends. They are, they have an intimacy with her, and they care about her, and she cares about them. And when he discovers that she's passing away, he offers, as an expert, as Starfleet's foremost expert, one of Starfleet's foremost experts on artificial intelligence, to help Data try and save her, and they don't manage to do it.
There was nothing anyone could have done. We'd repolarize one pathway and another would collapse. And then another. His hands were moving faster than I could see, trying to stay ahead of each breakdown. He refused to give up. It was remarkable. It just wasn't meant to be.
So good. So good. So, just hours ago, this man is convinced that Lal is property. Now he is convinced. Now he is grieving her in a very human way. It's not that we could have done something to save her, but we suck and we failed. He is deciding it wasn't meant to be. And this is us. This is us. We choose to believe in meaning for our suffering. As I stated before, I'm grateful to those of you who were here for me on Friday, when I basically had a meltdown while I was on the road. Let's not get into it. But I happened to mention that, as I have said many times, the difference between suffering and misery is that misery is pointless. If your suffering feels pointless, then it goes from a hard time to an impossible time. That's where people have to choose. We all have to choose at some point, especially if you have a strong logical capacity in your brain, if your positronic net is very advanced, to contemplate what it would be better to have no future than to even have the best future to come out of a miserable existence, out of an existence built in suffering. And so that is why I think, finally coming around on this guy, this is why I think that Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning and created logotherapy, which is learning to basically lie to yourself about whether or not there is a God, to believe in God, at least to believe in God as an idea that you are special in the universe, that you are meaningful, and that you're not going to let anybody take your life away from you. You remember that Frankl, developed this philosophy as a psychotherapist while he was in a concentration camp in Poland, I believe, in Auschwitz, I believe, and that might be wrong. Anyways, but he was in a concentration camp, and he saw firsthand that suffering, the ultimate suffering, at the hands of the Germans, the only way that people who were determined to survive in that circumstance of ultimate suffering, of torture and being relegated to slave labor, the only way that they could tolerate life and choose to go on is by deciding that they were going to spite the Germans, deciding that God had something else for them, deciding that they were special in some way. You had to choose if you were going to survive, if you're going to have a healthy outlook on life. You had to choose to accept that your suffering and your mortality existed because you have some divine purpose. And even if it isn't true, you have to believe it anyway, is basically his argument in Man's Search for Meaning, and the reason why it's one of my least favorite books, frankly, ever. Pop psychology always bothers me, but that pop psychology is really bad. This is much better pop psychology. So now, similarly, we now see the end of Lull. And once again, Data has to say goodbye to a woman in his life, this case, his daughter. And I want to show you, and I want us to see the processing as Data has to say goodbye to her.
I am unable to correct the system failure.
I know.
You must say goodbye now.
I feel.
What do you feel, Mom?
I love you, Father.
I wish I could feel it with you.
I will feel it for both of us. Thank you for my life. Flirting. Laughter. Painting family. Female. Humor.
So I'm going to skip ahead here and notice that what she did there is that as her neural net breaks down to its most primal state, basically she rewinds her experiences, and she talks about flirting, talks about basically discovering the feelings of romance by kissing Commander Riker. You're welcome there, Will. But she experiences her life in reverse. And we're gonna learn in a moment here how Data processes that grief. But before we get to that scene, I wanted to advance. This is another episode yet where Data learns that the wife of Noonien Sung, his creator, has apparently survived. Come to find out, no, she's an android too, but she's a little more advanced than Data. She has feelings, and but she thinks of herself as human. I think she actually believes she's human, and so and she meets him, and so he is reunited with his mother, and she decides to try and bond with him. And while she's bonding with him, she comes to his quarters, and this is what happens.
Did you paint these?
Yes. I am attempting to master all known styles of painting.
As a painter and an autistic person who loved Star Trek was new when I was a kid. Star Trek The Next Generation was new when I was a kid. So this is my Star Trek. I love this. I love the Data paints.
This one is in the style of the early French Impressionists.
Oh, it's very good. Who's this?
That is Lal, my daughter.
Your daughter?
I created her, using myself as a model.
Where is she now?
The positronic matrix I designed for her was unstable. She only lived a short time.
I see.
Did you notice there that Data, remember how I told you Data has to learn mannerisms so that he can blend in like an autistic person. He paused. It's like you can see the subroutines in his brain going and saying, you're about to tell somebody that a person that's part of their family existed. You just informed somebody that a member of their family existed, And now they want to know where that person is, and you're going to have to convey to them that the person is dead. So he pauses to give her a moment, just in case, because she has feelings, to prepare herself. He's giving her a trigger warning. This is going to suck. You just learned that that lull existed. You're about to get some bad news. And notice that she does. As soon as he tells her that she only lived a short period of time, she's discovered that she has a granddaughter and that the granddaughter is dead. And she has to stop and actually process it while he just goes on.
In a sense, you were her grandmother.
Okay, so now we're skipping back to the episode where The Offspring, where Lol has passed away. As Data comes to report into the bridge for his shift immediately following the passing of Lol, and he seems to be normal. Notice how Captain Picard and the crew react to that.
Lal suffered complete neural system failure at 1300 hours. I have deactivated the unit.
The crew is saddened by your loss, Mr. Data.
I thank you for your sympathy, but she is here. Her presence so enriched my life that I could not allow her to pass into oblivion. So I incorporated her programs back into my own. I have transferred her memories to me.
Mr. Data, will you take your position?
Notice, so that's the end of those clips. We'll have one more clip here at the end, but yeah. So notice that what happens with Data here. I said, I believe Lol became a humanoid female because she fills the absence inside of Data left by his would-be grief or his desire to grieve Tasha Yar. And Tashi represents to all the crew members throughout the series grief and fear of death and mortality. But to Data, she is more particular than that. She is a mirror into his desire to experience how finite life can be and how that fills them with purpose. Remember, I showed you the clip of Captain Picard, the moment that he has died, and Q sets it up as an opportunity for him to make amends and to choose to live his life differently. And he does. In that alternative reality, Q lets him regress back to the moment where he hooks up with that chick at Starfleet. Excuse me. He hooks up with a woman at Starfleet. And he can do it all again. He can make all the choices that a wise man in his 40s could make if he could go back and be 25 again and do everything differently. And he does. He chooses to call that girl back and keep his date with her later. He chooses to convince his friends that they don't want to cheat the Nausicaans, even if it is a point of pride for them. He doesn't, and he avoids getting stabbed through the heart, and avoids getting an artificial heart that eventually is the artificial heart that fails him during an away mission, resulting in his death. So he averts his own potential death, and by choosing to be more wise in his 20s, by going back and doing it again, getting a do-over. And this is really familiar to me, and I think it's familiar to most of us who are humans. I am an android, but I play a human in life. And that is that we often will go back to our lives when we contemplate the anxiety of mortality and death. We'll often replay, if I could go back and choose another major, if I could go back and not marry that person, if I could go back and choose to have children at a later point in life or not to have children at all. You rewind in your life and say, if only I could go back, if only I could do it again, if only I could do it again, I would be wise. The problem with that, of course, that Captain Picard learns is that the purpose of youth is to be stupid. It is to be unwise. The purpose of youth, if it has a purpose, naturally resulting from our experiencing this finite life from a child who doesn't understand their mortality, hopefully, to a grown person who does understand the mortality, is to try to do some things that are stupid, to run with scissors once in a while, to do something that pushes back against the norms, that's open to new experiences. This is what they claim is the difference between liberals and conservatives, is that liberals are people who are open to new experiences, where conservatives tend to be people who honor tradition and honor set traditions of a bygone era as being, eternal values, eternal truths. And so that, similar. So that's why people say everybody is conservative in their old age, but liberal in their youth, because when you were young, you have though you can see the world, you're more likely to be able to see the world optimistically as being a place that you can change. And it's a good thing that you do, because otherwise we would never change, and surely the species would eradicate itself, as we are likely to do anyway. But my moment I want to play this. A YouTube creator created this tribute to Data that goes over his journey. It blends his journey and his choice at the end of Picard, or in the series Picard later, his choice to become mortal. Because in the movie series, spoiler alert, Data is destroyed in a mission, but his consciousness has been preserved at Starfleet, and he continues to experience in his conscious body and in his positronic net. So as long as in a very materialistic way, like Data, we have this positronic net that contains all your memories, contains all of your capacity for thinking. And if our brains are our whole consciousness and existence, then preserving and backing up Data's programming, backing up his information, his hard drive, is making him immortal, even though his body is gone. And I've talked about this before in one of my episodes from one of my sermons from All My Prophets Paint, is that every time somebody gets onto the transporter pad on the Enterprise and gets beamed to somewhere else, they are reassembled. The being that was born in their mother's womb is gone. And the being that assembles on the planet or wherever is a wholly new constructed being, but that has all of the memory, all the desires, all of the anxieties about the future, all transferred into this new brain that is assembled on the other side of the beam. And then that being is then destroyed when they are beamed back up and reassembled from fresh matter. And the consciousness of that being, their fears, their anxieties, their memories, their logic, their trauma, is what makes them them. And the fact that being can then step off the transporter pad and go to Captain Picard or Commander Riker or whomever and report what happened down on the surface, remembering everything that happened to them in the past and feeling the same feelings about the future. And that is how these people get over what is known as transporter phobia, which Lieutenant Barclay has not. Lieutenant Barclay, we learn in an episode, has to be shuttled everywhere because he never learned to get over transporter phobia. And it's a big nuisance to everybody else who's just accepted that it's not ending your own life to get on the transporter pad and being, because the being, and I talked about how, and that makes sense, because the being that, if you think, well, the being that was born in my mother's womb is destroyed when I get on that pad. You're not thinking clearly, because every cell in your body is regenerated, with the exception possibly of ova, excuse me. But your whole body replaces every cell in your body as you are beamed, not up or down, but through time, but forward through time. The being that was born in your mother's womb is gone. You are the being born in you through time, and you are responsible to yourself. And so that is why all of us must be able to contemplate our anxiety, our fear of death, if it exists, as being a limitation of our evolution. The reason why we invent God to tell us one day you will return to me, you will be joyful, you will be happy for eternity, your anxieties will all have been worthwhile now, and I will make sure you feel it forever, is because there was no evolutionary advantage to our ancestors developing the neurological pathways, developing the positronic net, the computers, the subroutine in our meat computers, to say, contemplate the finiteness of your existence. And so when we see others around us pass away, you see it the first time that a child learns that grandma or grandpa has passed, or mom or dad had passed, or a sibling has passed, or that some famous person has passed. The anxiety that suddenly strikes, this awareness, beings don't exist forever. I am alive. I am a being. I won't exist forever. And it's a very natural thing for a child to ask when they are grieving somebody. Will this happen to me? How do I go on? Why is anything that I do meaningful if I will only die in the end? Our brains just don't naturally process the finiteness of our own existence. That is why it is perhaps the most traumatic experience for us to learn to grieve, because we must grieve ourselves. And that's why we shortcut. If human beings can get away with shortcutting trauma, we will every time. Autistic people will do it. Neurotypical people will do it. We all will do it. People from every race, every walk of life, every career, people of every intelligence level, although probably high IQ people, quote unquote, will probably process it more, because people, the more logical you are, the more logically based your thinking is. And for autistic people, that's usually a lot. The more literal your thinking is, the harder this anxiety is going to hit you again and again, not just once, again and again and again. And it will happen when we lose someone because they break our heart. It'll happen when we get a diagnosis that says you have obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, anxiety, ADHD, autism, ADHD. It happens when you learn you have lymphoma. It happens when you discover that you have breast cancer or stomach cancer, lung cancer, or someone close to you does. It happens when you learn that a child you brought into this world is suffering. It happens when people you love tell you, I don't know how to go on. These are the crises of our lives that, very much like sad heaven, make a person, as Hamlet says, that make calamity of so long a life. That we contemplate, if I am going to grow old in a world where everyone around me must suffer and I must suffer, why would I choose to be old at all? Why wouldn't I choose to escape? I talked a little bit about how these scenes about death between Q and Captain Picard, John Lancey and Sir Patrick Stewart, really strike home when you know Patrick Stewart, Captain Picard. Patrick Stewart, for decades, has been a staunch advocate in England of England's right to die with dignity. And he said that this is going to get, this is going to be triggery if you have existential crisis, as I do, but it's meaningful. So I'd ask you, if you have to abandon the sermon right now, I understand. But if you can stay, I think you'll get something from it. And it's a beautiful thing. Patrick Stewart tells a story about how he has a friend whose wife was dying. And as she was dying, her palliative care, her care for her pain, had to account for the fact that there wouldn't be enough painkiller they could put into her system to kill the pain without killing her. And because that's against the law, do no harm, her doctors can't prescribe her that much pain medication. And so she had months left to live in which she knew her anxiety would have to mount up in the awareness of a life that she didn't want to live, that would only mount up with greater and greater amounts of pain until it was unbearable. And at one point, she attempted to take her own life because she couldn't get prescription to do it properly, to do it effectively using better dying through chemistry, if you will. And it didn't work. It can actually be a very difficult thing to take your own life. Like, it can be physically difficult to do. You have to, your body wants to survive, tries to survive. And her husband found her. And then he had to, and spared her life, saved her life, a life she didn't want. And then the rest of their marriage, the rest of their time, he now has to live with that grief and the moral question of, did I make her suffer? Am I making her suffer? Because I'm too selfish to let her go. And Patrick Stewart talks about how he couldn't bear watching his friend live with it until the day when his friend went for a walk went to take the dog for a walk and came home to discover that his wife had managed this time to escape her pain. Watching this close friend of his experience this convinced Sir Patrick Stewart there has to be, in a day where we have the technology, an opportunity to say, regulate it, fine. Make it a doctor's treatment, fine. But allow some people in some circumstances the option to opt out of a life of suffering, where the suffering will only mount up and eventually kill them. Give them a chance to say goodbye. Give them a chance for their family to not feel guilty like they had tortured them by making them stay alive because we didn't want to grieve them, which you would have to do anyway. Giving a person a choice to end on their own terms. If you cannot live on your own terms, at least to end on your own terms. I talked a little bit about this in my book, The Korra Horror Argument. I'll never forget the first time I put these words down and thought, am I going to regret this? Is this too vulnerable to put out into the public? And to be frank, I've never regretted it since. I said these words, I wrote these words to be immortalized beyond my life. It may be that I will die by choking on a spoonful of soup. But if it isn't a circumstance like that, then I will kill myself. Because I would rather live. I came into this world without my consent, and I would end on better terms. At least knowing that I lived and died the way I wanted to. And that for me represents an improvement in a world where we see as a virtue that your death has to be an accident. That value is, in my opinion, frankly, unevolved. Like I say, it literally is unevolved. And it is a product of a brain, of a neurological system that is designed to try to survive and to associate freedom and choice, the ability to be excited about life, like Captain Picard. The result of Captain Picard, I'm going to go back to this, sorry, I promise I'm wrapping this up. Captain Picard chooses to call the girl back when he goes back and has a second chance at his life. I wish I had recorded this. I thought about doing it, but he chooses to call the girl back and go on that date. He chooses, which results in a relationship that doesn't work out, by the way. He chooses to betray his friend's pursuit of adventure by trying to cheat the Nausicaans in that game, in that fateful game where he gets stabbed and loses his real heart and gets a fake heart, gets an artificial heart, which ironically enough is that artificial heart that gives him the will to take risks and to live. And because he played it safe, fast forward to his life on the Enterprise as that Jean-Luc Picard, and not the Jean-Luc Picard who chose to cheat, who chose to have the one-night stand, who chose to be rebellious and adventurous and go off and take his position on the Stargazer that eventually winds up being where his captain is killed. He steps up, takes command of the bridge, loses his best friend, by the way, who is Beverly Crusher's husband, Wesley's dad. Falls in love with Beverly, can't tell her. We learned this in another episode where he and Beverly are on an away mission, and they, because of some technological factor, they can hear each other's thoughts and they can feel each other's feelings. And she learns as she is sitting there, she is inside his head and he is inside of hers, that he loves her. That he doesn't love her since she was the doctor on the Enterprise. He loves her since she was his best friend's wife. And she asks him, why did you never say anything? He says, you were married to my best friend. That Jean-Luc Picard doesn't exist in this new timeline. In this new timeline, the Jean-Luc Picard who plays it safe, who plays his 20s like he's a man in his 40s, winds up being a low-ranked science officer deployed in a mundane position on the Enterprise, watching as Will Riker and all the other crewmen on the Enterprise, all the crew members of the Enterprise, go on exciting adventures and live a better life. But he has the memories of Captain Picard, of the Captain Picard. So he requests a meeting with Counselor Troy and Will Riker, his number one, who is now his superior officer in this timeline, and asks them, and they ask him, and they, frankly, they don't remember him. They're like, Picard, right? Lieutenant Picard. And he's like, yes, that's me. And they're like, oh, okay. And he asks them to give him an evaluation. Well, how would you say I have performed on the Enterprise? And they say, you're fine. You're timely with your, prompt, punctual with your assignments. You're doing fine, keep, and he says, what do I have to do to get advancement in a position, in a department on the Enterprise where I might get a post that might lead to command? And Riker basically shuts him down and says, listen, command is wonderful and it's great for some people, but Mr. Picard, you don't do anything to get yourself noticed. You don't take risks. You play it safe. And in command, that's a problem. You, at this stage of your life, should just learn to accept that you can be the best science officer you can be. Okay? And he basically tells him, don't think about that kind of thing. You're too old. You're too old to think about this. This is the kind of thing you should have been thinking about in your 20s. This is the kind of thing you should have been thinking about. And when you had an opportunity to do more to get noticed. Unfortunately, the ship has sailed for you. And Jean-Luc Picard becomes so dismayed at this that he conjures up Q. He's like, okay, Q, I get it. All right, I understand. And he gets into the turbo lift. He's like, Q, what are you, answer me. I'm done with this farce. And then when the turbo lift opens, it's the eternities, the perpetual white eternities, where Q claims that he is God, and that he and Jean-Luc are going to spend eternity together. And he says, this is what you wanted. You wanted a chance to play it safe. You wanted a chance to be the man you thought you would be if you had a chance to do it over again. But that man played it safe. That man never took a chance. He was never noticed by anyone So why wouldn't you want it? Is it just the glory, the pomp, the fanfare of being captain of the Enterprise? And Jean-Luc Picard says to him, that man is bereft of passion. Boom. And he says, if I return you to the other timeline, you die on that table. Yeah, that heart can't be restored. And Dr. Crusher can't save you. You might die. It may very well be that is this end of the final chapter of Jean-Luc Picard, of Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Do you really want to experience that? Because if you do, I'll put you back in the timeline with the Nausicans, where you and your friends cheat the Nausicans, where you have the one night stand with the woman you never call back, who you now know nothing was ever going to work out with her anyway. And you're going to have to choose to be young and stupid and not wise, and let 20-something Picard be 20-something Picard. Is that what you want? And he says, yes, I would rather die as the passionate man that I was than live one day as that man. And then Q sends him back to the bar in his 20s, young Starfleet officer, where he starts a bar fight with the Nausicaans and his friends and get stabbed through the heart. That is not the clip.
Wasn't very smart of you to take on.
Anyway, maybe I pushed StreamYard too hard. Hopefully not. That's what Data wants to experience. That's why Data creates Lal, his daughter. That's why he grieves her. That's why he wants to grieve Tasha. That's why I have said many times, I think in his mind, Data feels like people identify him as a man. But in his mind, at least part of him is a woman. It's the hole in Data that was Tasha Yar. Like all of us. I say many times, you've never met your mother. They say your first being you know is your mother, right? Because you hear her voice. You hear her giggling when you are in the womb. You don't know that person. You don't know her passion. You don't know her fears. You don't know her pain. You are a meat computer that's gestating inside of her body. It doesn't mean you understand her. It doesn't mean you experience what she experiences. And then all your perceptions of her are taken in through your senses. Plausibly. Probably. So your mother is an impression in your mind, just as Lal is an impression in Data's mind. Data keeps a backup of Lal's memories in his brain. She is his experiences as a woman. She is his experiences as a being with feelings. She is his experiences as a being that knows her father, which he did not really know, Nunyan Sung. He did not know his creator. She knew her father. She loved her father. Her last feeling in life, brief as it was to tell her father that she loved him and that if he could not feel it for her, she would feel it for them both. And he absorbed all of that experience into himself. And so it makes total sense that years after they gave Data a noble end, Jonathan Frakes, I believe, gave him a noble end in the Star Trek movies, they made Picard, the series Picard. And for a lot of us, I didn't love Picard, the series. I was rather disappointed. But this relationship between Picard and Data and the way it ended for Data, really Picard should have been called Data. And I was very touched by this tribute created by a YouTube creator that hopefully will work this time. Let me remove everything else, see if this works. That composites both Data's experiences and also crew members' experiences about other people like Worf. But I thought it was a good compilation. I thought it was profound. So I want to share that with you, hopefully, if it works.
Would I be correct, Professor, in assuming that you know whether or not I am still alive in the 26th century? Are you referring to the foreknowledge of my death?
Yeah. This is gonna bother you a little.
On the contrary, I find it rather comforting.
Comforting?
I have often wondered about my own mortality as I have seen others around me age. Until now, it has been theoretically possible that I would live an unlimited period of time. And although some might find this attractive, to me it only reinforces the fact that I am artificial.
I want to live, however briefly, knowing that my life is finite.
It provides a sense of completion to my future. In a way, I am not that different from anyone else. I can now look forward to death. One might also conclude that it brings me one step closer to being human. I am mortal.
Mortality gives meaning to human life, Captain.
Wouldn't you come to look on death as a release? Now, we don't have to agree with it. We don't have to understand it. But do have to respect his beliefs.
Which is why I would like to ask you to do me a favor.
Of course, anything.
When you leave, I would be profoundly grateful if you terminated my consciousness.
You want to die?
I can respect his beliefs, but he is asking me to take an active part in his committing suicide.
He's asking for your help because you're his friend. That means that you're going to have to make your decision based on that friendship.
Very well. I will do what you ask.
Thank you, sir.
I will terminate him. I should be the one to do it. I'm his captain. And his friend.
And he wanted, more than anything else, to be a part of the human family. We are such stuff as dreams are made on.
He who was my companion through adventure and hardship is gone forever. He was a man, taken for all in all. I shall not look upon his like again.
Hamlet, appropriate. As I load in a closing hymn for us, I just wanted to make a mention to you guys. You know that one of my perhaps toxic traits in life is that I am very vulnerable and very publicly so. Luckily for me, part of my autism is shielding my self-worth with a masochistic kind of humor. And so I'm very fortunate in that way. I believe very much in sad heaven. More specifically, I believe that I would be miserable existing at all for eternity. Whenever the concept occurs to me, perhaps because so young in life, I dealt with let's say, the trauma of existential crisis. I'm just going to load this real quickly here. Having dealt with it so young, and some of you have heard that story, I crossed a Rubicon inside myself. It's very similar to Captain Picard's death at the hands of that Nausicaan knife, where I feel like my heart is an artificial heart that has had to relearn how to feel, having grieved myself, having grieved this dream that we are sold about a meaning that exists because we exist forever, which is a cheat. It is a lie. It is a consolation that we have been told exists when we were children, at the same time that we believe that Santa Claus comes down the chimney and brings the presents that just happen to show up on our parents' credit card bills. It is a childish hope. It is not founded in the reality that were we to actually exist in any capacity forever, we would be lonely without the ones we love, especially the ones who get damned to hell because they chose the wrong religion. The ones who some people believe in a doctrine of annihilation. I put to you, not at all biblically supported, but maybe I'm wrong. But whether it is or it isn't, they believe that some people are damned to hell because they're evil, but other people, because they do not have faith, are left in a state, are either annihilated, they cease to exist, or they are left in some kind of state where they are unaware of their state. And I think to myself, but the only state that would be blissful in an eternal sense is one that had no emotions. That was what Data fears he is, unable to feel. When the reality is, Data is experiencing everything from the loss of Tasha to the loss of his child to the grief over never having known his father, of being afraid that he could never please his father, very much like Jean-Luc Picard. His grief over not having been able to make different choices, and even his recollection of barely surviving the transition into being born, because as he came to logically process what existence was, it caused his brain, that brilliant brain that could do so many calculations so much faster than any living brain in the world, any organic meat computer in the world, to crash and fail. That logical brain, if left to itself, would choose to die rather than exist. And he chose life instead. Chose before he knew his name, before he knew his parents, before he knew before he knew that he had a brother, before he knew love, romance, betrayal, hate, anger. There's this great episode where Data is confronted with a circumstance where he is attacked by a member of the Borg, a cybernetic living being who has developed emotions and independence from the Borg collective. And the energy frequency off of this being, the energy off of this being causes him, after witnessing this being kill one of his crewmates, to suddenly feel anger in a way that he actually goes to the holodeck and artificially recreates the circumstance and tries to do it again and again, even just trying to feel that feeling again. And he later, turns out his brother, Lore, has created this experience for him, and asks him in the moment, or no, I beg your pardon, no, the Borg that has been freed into independence, in conversation with him, asks him, what did you feel in that moment? And he answers and says, anger, hate, as he kills this Borg. And you can tell he tries to replicate it in the holodeck as he kills this Borg and says the line that he says in real life when he killed the actual Borg. He says, no, 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 no. And I think at the end he says, die. And it wasn't the same. But in the brief moment when he felt it, it was passionate. No, 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 die. And he kills. He murders this Borg, and in pursuit of justice, because the Borg had killed his friends because the Borg was trying to kill him because he was protecting himself. This emotion, this human emotion that this individualism he got from the frequency of energy off of this Borg caused him to feel all those feelings come up in the surface and to react, unable to control himself. And in that moment, the Borg asks him, "What did you feel?" And he says, "Hate." And he says, what would you do to experience that feeling, that emotion again? And Data says, anything. He says, how did it feel to hate, to kill? And he says, good. And he says, do you have a friend? This Borg asks him. Yes. Calls back the clip we just watched a few minutes ago. What's your friend's name? Geordi. Would you kill Geordi to feel that hate again, to feel that emotion? And Data honestly answers, yes. Just like Jean-Luc Picard, if we as sentient beings, knowing that we will die, that we can't exist forever, that there is no heaven and there is no hell, compact all of our future experiences into just what remains of our life, what we can reasonably anticipate will be between here and the end of our life, not knowing how we will die, most of us. If we can take that afterlife and say there is nothing after death, everything about what makes our life meaningful we have to do now. Because just as Data says, the finiteness of life is what makes it meaningful. The beautiful thing about life is that it ends, is that you die. And you had this moment. And so when you look to the meaning of your future, instead of striving to experience everything for eternity, because when you experience everything, you will experience pain and grief. You will experience regret. That's part of everything. There really cannot be a happy heaven, because the greatest thing that we can strive for in this life is that while we were here, something born within each of us individually manifested itself as being, this is who I am, this is what I'm here to do, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to accomplish it. If I don't turn out to be rich, that's fine. If I don't turn out to be famous, that's fine. If I don't turn out to have children, that's fine. If I don't find my soulmate, that's fine. That's all fine. But this being that sparks inside of me determined itself, created itself, looked to itself as it was beamed forward in time and said, if I have only this opportunity to flash in the dark, I will flash bright. For me, that is the courage to do what is right and to rely only on that voice within you, to know that voice within you that says this is what is right. And when you look to it written in the stars, you go to look to it written on a stone or a tablet, it's not there. It's not there. There's no law. There's no justice in the universe apart from that little piece of star stuff between this here and this here, and some in your viscera. when you contemplate that you will die, when you choose to live in spite of the finiteness of your, that's not the word, but let it stand, the finiteness of your life, and say, that's not yet. Not yet. This is the moment when I will flash. And if I must flash, I will flash bright. That makes this life, this brief moment that you have left in the world, your heaven. And the attachment to hoping that you will go on experiencing for eternity so that you don't have to contemplate your own death, which is totally natural to do, to make up a lie that says, no, Jesus loves me and has a plan for my life. God has a purpose for me. God has a mission for me. Chase that as long as you need to. And I assure you, what you will discover is that it will bring you misery and pain. Life is suffering. Life is pain. Siddhartha, the Buddha Gutta, taught us that. And it's true. The first noble truth of Buddhism. All the other noble truths of Buddhism, I have to say I could do without. But that one, the dukkha in Sanskrit, all that is born suffers. Yes, the rich suffer, though it might not seem that way. The beautiful suffer because rich people. I asked, remember I asked my best friend once upon a time, my business partner, Paul. I said, my worries about money are all my problems in life, because luckily for me, I have the privilege of not really knowing what it's like to be sick. Not really sick, which is real privilege. But I asked him, I said, all my problems in life are related to not having enough money. What do rich people worry about? And he said, losing your money. And I realized there really is no escaping the suffering. Everyone has to contemplate it. There's a line from the movie, knows pop culture informs a lot of my philosophy. Remember in the movie Guardians of the Galaxy, when is it Drac asks the little creature, the beautiful little creature that he thinks is ugly, he's like, you are hideous to look at. Yes. And she's like, I'm ugly. He says, you are hideous. And she's like, oh, I didn't know. And he says, but that's a good thing. When you're hideous, when you are ugly, you know that the people who love you really do. Beautiful people never know who to trust. It's not wrong. It's true. I mean, it must be. I don't know. Never having been beautiful myself. I am content with average. This is life. It's painful. And if it is meaningless, and this much I think Frankl was right, Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning. If you feel like it is meaningless, the suffering can become so overwhelming that you could hardly choose to survive. And there's scientific data that shows that if you, in your mind, give up that will to live, it can kill you. It can actually convince your body to shut down. Imagine what it's doing to your brain. Imagine what it's doing to your own mind every moment that you are here against your will. My objective is not to convince you to choose not to live. My objective is to convince you to live as if this is your heaven. But instead of a place where suffering doesn't exist, where sickness doesn't exist, where death doesn't exist, this moment is your heaven, where your suffering is meaningful because it is purposeless and you are purposeful. That when you connect to your feelings, look inside yourself and say, that part of me which chooses to live, what does it choose to live for? What does it choose to do? You can't create the legacy that will live behind you. There are plenty of people throughout history who did wonderful things in their life, were very noble in all of their ambitions, and were maligned and scarred and disfigured in their memory of time in history, who were nothing like what we have been told. And yet, they, while they were here, had to choose to live. How? How do you choose to live in a world where your suffering isn't meaningful to the universe and isn't meaningful to the creator of the universe or the creator of you? You are the creator of you. You always were. Every being who believed in God was their own God. They were looking for him up in the stars in the sky when the star stuff that was their God was already in the star stuff of their body. What a loss. What a waste, I put to you. What a waste to not realize that the universe doesn't give you things. You are the universe. The creator doesn't have a plan or purpose for you. You are the only plan and purpose you have, and far from meaningless. It is meaningful. It is the only meaning that there is. So I say, choose. I would put to you, try it. Try this mantra. If it matters to me, then it matters. In fact, it's all that matters. Pick it up, play with it. If it brings you something, blessings to you. And if it doesn't, well, then I'm an idiot and forget I said anything. Amen. For the Church of Korihor, we're going home. Flash bright, my friends.
Oh, Korihor, you dare to speak forbidden truths that make men free. By Alma's hand, unholy sorcery, they stole your voice for Nephite tyranny. From hypocrisy, starve to be free. He died for me. They showed you